Hi everybody, my name is Jesus Hernandez. I am from the Botanical Garden Experimental Institute at the Central University in Caracas, Venezuela. I work mainly at the National Herbarium. I'm here today to talk to you about a new look at the Venezuelan lichen diversity. Last time I talked about the Venezuelan lichen diversity, it was about 2008 in Costa Rica. Before this, I used to give this talk every 2 years. So I will bring you up to date with our checklist and our species richness, and try to reinforce some learned experiences in these COVID times. So the first and obvious thing we will talk about is the number of species known for Venezuela. About 4 years ago, we decided to start working our own checklist with all new reports we were finding. Before that, we just relied on Foyer's checklist of Venezuelan species. Well, the work on the checklist started much earlier. You could say it started when I began sharing information with Tassilo Foyer after I met him in 2004. I used to send him information, and I made my notes on the side of all the information I sent him. Anyway, back to the topic. This recent checklist has been generated by maybe one of the most ambitious Venezuelan lichen projects, which is the Venezuelan Lichen Herbaria Census. This project has the objective of digitalizing all the lichen herbaria in Venezuela and the Venezuelan lichen collection stored abroad. Today, it is the largest lichen collection database in Latin America. This database is recently being incorporated into the consortium of Latin American lichen herbaria, which I take the moment to invite you to our workshop this weekend in the IAL activities. So with our checklist, you can see we have greatly added species to Venezuela. As you can see, the checklist did not change much since 1995 to 2008. We can see it added maybe 100 species, 100 new reports, and from 2008 to 2020, well, we have almost there like 500 species, over 500 species of these 560. In the next graph, you can see part of the results from the Venezuelan lichen herbarium census. What you see on the lower axis are the Venezuelan herbaria, all the main herbaria, mainly plant herbaria, and these are the lichen collections. The most important one is MERF, which is the lichen herbarium at the pharmacy faculty in the Andes University. It has 26,418 lichen specimens. These are most of these are, almost all of them, belong to Manuel Lopez Figueira, which you could say maybe is our greatest lichen collector here in Venezuela. Now the last two bars, they both belong to the National Herbarium. I neglected the two bars are 2008 and 2021. This is the lichen collections that have been incorporated into the National Herbarium. So that's almost 6,000 specimens from 2008 to 2021. And on the other herbarium, like 4 or 5 specimens were incorporated in all the herbaria, so that's why I neglected that data, but they all belong from pre-2008, and the numbers are the same until 2021. Now I would like to show you the distribution of these collections in the country. This is a bioregions map of Venezuela. We can see that the 3 regions with more collections are the Andes, that's the purple to the left, the Guyana, which is the green at the bottom, and the coastal Cordillera, which is at the north. Blue represents the collections before 2008, and red are the collections from 2008 to 2021. In the side table, you can see in red the bioregions which have increased more than 50% since 2008. As we all know, elevated rainforests are regions with most species richness, which is evidence here since these three areas are the highest in the countries. One thing I would like you to notice is that most of the new collections from 2008 to 2021 are in the coastal Cordillera, of course, close to the National Herbarium. And even though the Andes and Guyana are the most collected, they were poorly collected in these years, maybe due to the distance from the National Herbarium, where is the place where the main lichenologists have been since the year 2000. Okay, now let's take a look at the composition. The families with most species in 2008 are Parmeliaceae, Cladoniaceae, Graphidaceae, Parmeliaceae, Physciaceae, as you can read there, and then we have Trypetheliaceae almost at the end. For 220, it differs a bit. We have Graphidaceae going up one space and Trypetheliaceae going up, and we have also Gomphiliaceae and Parmeliaceae and Cladoniaceae appearing in the most important species, in the most important families with the most amount of species. So if we take a look at that same comparison but with genera, macrolichens dominate the scene in 2008, but 2021 we start seeing genera like Astrathelium rising to the top. And another thing worth noticing is that Graphis rises to the 4th place, and if it had not been splitted with Allographa, I am sure Graphis would be in the 1st place. That's very important, and you're going to see briefly why. So from these graphs we can now analyze a bit of the information we have here. We can first say that more collections obviously translate into more new reports in countries like Venezuela, more developed countries where they are close to their expected species richness. This is not true, but in Venezuela, the expected number of species calculated by Dr. Robert Lichen is about 4,200 species. This means that we still have not reached even 50% of what is expected. We have only found about 1,886 is about 45% of 4,200, so we still have a lot to go. But a signal that we are not far away is the rising in position of the big three. These are Graphidaceae, Trypetheliaceae, and Pyrenulaceae. These three are the most specious tropical microlichen families. And as we can remember, these three families moved up on the list of species in composition. Graphidaceae moved up 3 spaces, Trypetheliaceae moved up to 5th place, and Pyrenulaceae is now in the 12th place. Once before it was like in 16th or 17th position. So, well, all this translates into we still have a lot of work to do, but the question now is, do we really have to go and collect a lot more? And here comes my reflections on the subject. During this pandemic, I took home like 20 boxes of lichen specimens, just good old herbarium material. Well, this resulted in close to 200 new reports for the country. One of the things COVID has taught me is the potential of what we have in our herbariums. Most of the collections most of the collections in the Venezuelan National Herbarium were done in maybe what you could call the golden age of expeditions in Venezuela, when Venezuela was a rich country. That was between, you could say, the 50s and 70s, 80s, something like that. And in those days, great expeditions were done to rare places, exotic places in Venezuela. And there was a lot of money that went into getting to know the diversity of our country. And, well, not only the diversity of the country, but the country per se. A lot of the country was still not completely mapped, and that was a great opportunity for botanists and of course mycologists and the few lichenologists that were able to go to these expeditions. Nowadays, I hardly remember when was the last time I was able to go on a field trip. I ended up studying, going a lot more for urban lichens. That was what I could find in the street. Very difficult times have come to Venezuela, and I hope all this will change, not only with the pandemic, but with economic problems that we are going through. But that is not part of the talk. I'm here more to talk about the good things that we have been able to accomplish, and our reflections about how we have done this. So the thing is that this situation repeats in various countries. There are still a great number of specimens that have not even been looked at since they were collected in exotic places of the planet. Of course, it is now necessary to collect fresh material for DNA studies, but this doesn't take away the great potential we have in herbarium specimens. Another place where we have great deficiency in Latin American countries, well, not all of them, is micro, succiculus, and folliculus lichens. Microlichens were under-collected with the excuse that there were no good keys to identify them, and also because they are not as, let's say, colorful, to say in a way, as foliose and fruticulous lichens. Succiculus lichens have been neglected because they are hard to collect for well, not for everyone, but who doesn't know or hasn't had experience, who's not been taught how to. This is well, maybe not even having the tools, it is a difficult task. And last, folliculus lichens are neglected for their size, and because as I said, most of the collections for example, in Venezuela, were not done by lichenologists, but by botanists. And most of these botanists only saw microlichens and lichens that were on trees, on tree trunks. So folliculus lichens were basically not overlooked. They were overlooked, neglected. Well, now it's not like that, because we have keys. We have very important keys to use. For example, the Flora tropica, and most of the collections are now done by lichenologists and mycologists. So there's not that problem anymore, but there used to be. So there still is a great gap in what would be expected to find in this area of microlichens, succiculus, and folliculus. It is very important nowadays to fill those gaps that that exist, not only with these lichens that have been neglected, but also in some regions that, simply because they're not very interesting for botanists, but they could be very interesting for us lichenologists. Well, there's still a lot of work to be done, and this, I think, is the main conclusion of this presentation. And not all of that work is in the field. I think there's a lot we can still do in our herbariums, and maybe this talk is to a little bit to push all those who have neglected those herbarium specimens and only go to them when they have to verify the identity of a species. There's still a lot there that we can use. Well, obrigado. Thank you very much.